So if you're shuffling papers or whatever, you put yourself on mute. Or if you're clicking on the keyboard, please do that. Hey, Bernadette. And everybody's got these handles now. Maybe that's the way it happens when you go on YouTube, but that's cool with me. I'm glad to see you. We're going to be up in 10 seconds. In 5, 2. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive. Let me start that again. Let me get my articulation together. We'll start at the top of the minute. How about that? There we go. Oh, easy peasy. Hey, girl, how you doing? Sending you so much love. That's right. In 5. Hey, girl, love you, Paula. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a joy, an absolute joy to be with you today. One day to the next day to the day after that, I never know what's going to come up because we are living in the fierce urgency of now, as Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said. So many things are on the table at the same time. I don't even know what to talk about from show to show to show. We're still in the midst of the ICE raids and the tracking by really the police state. Many people still have questions about the government shutdown. 750,000 government workers are being furloughed each day. It's a lot. People are getting paychecks, half of a paycheck. We don't know if the president is going to completely reimburse people for work they would have done had it not been for the government shutdown. Who's been fired? There's a lot to talk about. And in coming shows, we will talk about this. As we look at the peace deal, one has to ask the question, is it a ceasefire or is it peace? And now that Gaza has really 83 to 90% of the buildings have been leveled, and you still have people who have business deals to turn Gaza into a resort, what's really going to happen with the Palestinians? Have we thought about that? Yeah. And as we were reporting on what happened with the Israelis who were held in captivity by Hamas, many of them were prisoners of war. Number one, they were IDF soldiers who were captured. That doesn't make you a hostage. But no one talked about the more than 1,700 Palestinians who were held without charge. Think about that. I saw on X and on TikTok one gentleman who was a photojournalist who had been held in captivity for 2 years, and he'd been tortured. He'd been told that his wife and children had been murdered. He was devastated by that, of course. And you saw the video footage of him collapsing in grief. Can you imagine? That's his whole world. Then as he walked upstairs into his apartment building, his wife walked out of the apartment. They had lied to him. And then his children ran out. He almost collapsed. I reposted it, everybody. So meet me on X at Santita J. And on Facebook, the Santita Jackson and Friends page. CNN didn't report that. MSNBC didn't report that. Fox, none of them did. But that did happen. Then there was another gentleman who was in captivity in Israel, and he was beaten before he was let go. Oh, but you know what? We're going to deal with some issues that are a little closer to home, like the Voting Rights Act. You know, the so-called slave amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, really moved America forward. You freed African Americans from slavery, unless you went to jail for a crime. That's the caveat there. But then you got your voting rights and you got your citizenship. All that is bundled together. Think about that. Well, a key provision of the Voting Rights Act is under threat. Indeed, many feel that the Shelby County decision completely gutted the Voting Rights Act because something called pre-clearance was eliminated. I'm going to have Darrell Jones, the chairman of the Transformative Justice Coalition. He and Attorney Barbara Arnwine are the foremost experts. And really, they are the fighters in this space. And we thank God for the work that the Transformative Justice Coalition does do. We've got to talk about that. What could happen with this Louisiana case that is before the Supreme Court right now that could completely undo voting rights, the Voting Rights Act? See, LBJ got into the White House and he looked around and he said, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? Many people were devastated. Everybody was devastated that John F. Kennedy had been killed. And people were frightened that this Southern gentleman was going to be the president. What would he do to undo the promise that John Kennedy held? Well, actually, he did a lot of great things. And perhaps for Black people, there's been no more consequential a president than LBJ. My father said often, they said, and maybe that's why they buried him in history, because so much was done under the Great Society, and it was undone by the war in Vietnam. But he did get through because he was a legislative genius, the Voting Rights Act, because he looked up and said in 1870, when we got this amendment that gave Black people the right to vote, there was no teeth. Because White people in the 95 years since had not been able to vote because of barriers that had been elected in areas that had histories of discrimination. So the Voting Rights Act, as my father has explained it to me, as Reverend James Bevel, and all these wonderful people I knew growing up, they said, Dr. King said that the crown jewel of the civil rights movement is the Voting Rights Act. My father's longest serving staff member, Reverend Frank Watkins, who made his transition, and you worked with him, Attorney Darrell Jones, he was an absolute genius. I said, why is the Voting Rights Act so important? Why is the vote so important? He and my father said, because that is the right upon which all others rest. You really become a citizen when you have your voting rights. So let's talk about that. And let's talk about what this Louisiana case could do. And that's at a time when, let me get my notes. These states are up to have their borders redrawn, their congressional borders. California, Utah, Nebraska, Kansas, Texas, New Hampshire, Illinois, New York, Missouri, Indiana, Ohio, North Carolina, Florida, and Maryland. Yeah, no one's really talking about that. And even if the Democrats are able to save these Democratic seats, well, guess what? The Republicans have already got it figured out. They have locked in a permanent majority, and Attorney Darrell Jones, Reverend Jeanette Wilson of Rainbow Push, and Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds, David Daley's been telling us this, Attorney Darrell Jones, for years. And no one wanted to listen. And he's been saying, you've got to understand what these people have put into play. So, okay, I've talked long enough, tried to give everyone a frame. And of course, I know Attorney Darrell Jones will be talking about this in the coming weeks on the radio show that he and Attorney Barbara Arnwine anchor together on WOL in DC at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time every Tuesday. Help me to understand. Oh, yes, easy peasy. Paul, he passed a couple of years ago. It was just devastating, but he left quite a body of work behind. Attorney Darrell Jones, what are we looking at? Because I said anytime the major networks are saying that the entire Voting Rights Act is under assault, that the entire Voting Rights Act, that quite frankly, Chief Justice John Roberts, his whole career has been about undoing the Voting Rights Act. Mm-hmm. Indeed, he was seen to be a bright star in the legal space as an undergraduate, and he was ushered through the system. And he got into the right schools, he got the right internships, the right clerkships, and then he was fast-tracked for the Supreme Court. I mean, these things don't just happen, everybody. And the thrust of his work has been to undo the Voting Rights Act. Indeed, he wrote the majority opinion in the Shelby County case. So, what are we looking at right now? And is it as dire as everyone is saying, Attorney Jones?
Well, yeah. Hello, Santita, and thanks for giving the platform for this in the issue. Yes, it is as dire as everyone is saying. It is even more dire than some are saying. Here's what's happening. The case is the Louisiana versus Calais. We call it the Calais case, Callais, Louisiana versus Calais. Here's what's happened, and I just want to give by way of the background. In 2020, there was the U.S. Census that was done, and the U.S. Census is what is used to determine the congressional representation from various areas within states throughout the country. Well, in the 2020 U.S. Census that was done, Louisiana had received an influx of African Americans and Black folk that was coming down into Louisiana. Louisiana had in place already one majority minority district. Well, after the 2020 census, it showed that Louisiana now had nearly a 33% African American population. With that population, it deserved, under the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, a second majority minority district. That easy, that simple. That's what should be happening. Well, the Louisiana state government, the Louisiana legislature said, we're not interested in giving Black folk another congressional district. We don't want to give them any more power than what they already have out of this. So we're not going to draw a second majority minority district to be represented. Well, Press Robinson, who is a longtime voting rights, civil rights activist that lives in Louisiana, he and a couple of other African Americans that were there filed suit, alleging a violation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, saying that their voting power was being diluted unlawfully, and that they are entitled to have a second majority minority district drawn for the state of Louisiana. When they filed the suit, they went into the U.S. District Court. The U.S. District Court judge said, you know what, Press Robinson and folks, y'all right. You do merit, under the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, a second majority minority district. You're winning. You got this. And so they ruled. The state legislature in Louisiana said, we don't care. We're not going to draw this second congressional majority minority district for Black folk. We're not going to do it. So the court then said, the U.S. District Court then said, well, if you're not going to do it, we're going to draw the second majority minority district for the state of Louisiana, since you're not going to do it, state legislature. Well, when that threat was lodged, the Louisiana state legislature then thought about it and said, well, wait a minute. If the court draws this district, this second majority minority district, we don't know what they're going to do with Steve Scalise, our ranking member of the Republican Party of the Congress that's out of Louisiana. We don't know what they're going to do with Speaker Mike Johnson's district. Might they then become endangered of losing re-election because of the district that the U.S. District Court was going to draw? So as a result of that, the Louisiana state legislature then said, okay, we're drawing the second majority minority district. Here you go. You got it. It's in play. Hooray, right? We win. Not so fast. There were some white folk in Louisiana and said, well, wait a minute. This is reverse discrimination. Okay? You are discriminating against us. We have equal protections under the 14th and 15th Amendment. What you're doing now is discriminating against us. And they filed a lawsuit in the federal court based on that. And in the district court, they won. And so now that case, along with the original case that was filed by Press Robinson and intervened, has now gone up to the U.S. Supreme Court. So the U.S. Supreme Court tomorrow will be hearing arguments as to whether or not the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is constitutional. Should it be in place at all? Or should it just be the Equal Protection Clause under the 14th and 15th Amendment that are in play? Santita, this is the urgency of all of this. There are some 62 members of the Congressional Black Caucus. It's already been analyzed that should the Supreme Court decide that Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is unconstitutional, that at least 20 to 23 of those members will be gerrymandered, redistricted, and lose their elections, losing the effectiveness of the Congressional Black Caucus. And it goes beyond that, because what it will also mean is that in terms of redistricting in the future and redistricting cases that are going to be being done around the country, that all of them will be open. It'll be open season. It's what I call supercharging. It's going to supercharge all of this gerrymandering that you could possibly imagine, so that state legislatures are going to draw districts that are going to be at the disinterest of the African American as well as brown voters throughout the country. That's what's at issue in this case in a nutshell, Santita.
Is there anything? Well, let me ask you this: what would life look like without the Voting Rights Act for us in 2025?
Wow. If you take away the Voting Rights Act, what the Voting Rights Act does, right, is that the Voting Rights Act assures that there will not be pieces that are put in place, mechanisms that are put in place to discriminate against Black and brown voters, to make it more difficult, or anything to block the ability of those communities to be able to elect representatives of their choice. If you remove those guardrails that will allow white majorities to go in there and crack, stack, move around Black folks all over the place, so that it becomes nearly impossible for them to be able to elect representatives that are of like mind to the areas in which they're living. That's the net effect of what will happen if Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is deemed unconstitutional. It's really interesting, and I do want to raise this. We shouldn't be where we are right now. We should not be where we are right now. Let me tell you what I mean by that. This case, with the Voting Rights Act being litigated, was heard, the oral arguments were heard by the U.S. Supreme Court in March of this year. And Janae Nelson from the Legal Defense Fund, NAACP Legal Defense Fund, who did the argument, did a magnificent job, knocked the ball out of the park, as they say. Well, perhaps she did too great of a job, because, and what's really unheard of, unprecedented for the most part, very, very rarely in my lifetime have I ever heard this happen. The Supreme Court said, you know what, we heard your arguments in March. We're changing the issues now. We're going to broaden the issues, and we want you to come back tomorrow, October the 15th, and re-argue based on these issues. So rather than just talking about the race and Section 2 and the discrimination of the Voting Rights Act as it applies to this situation in Louisiana, the Supreme Court now has said, y'all, when you come back, we want you to answer the question of, one, did race predominate in the drawing of the district lines? What? That is okay. Second.
But wait a minute, hold on, because didn't Sandra Day O'Connor, who wrote a prior opinion that was a blow to the Voting Rights Act, she talked about, these congressional districts that considered race. No one's talking about the racism that's excluded everybody, but she said it looks like political apartheid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, where did she come up with that? I mean, everyone talks about political apartheid today, but no one talks about all of the racism that got us here, Daryl.
And it's funny you should say that, because the other thing that the U.S. Supreme Court said that they wanted the attorneys to come back tomorrow to brief on was whether or not America was beyond, the United States was beyond the need, the necessity for Section 2, for race to be considered. Aren't we now a race-blind society?
Isn't that what Robert said in Shelby? Okay, help me.
where you are, where you are is where they're trying to go. That's exactly where they're trying to go. And so,
No,
that was
not where I am. That's what Robert.
meaning where you're
Oh,
speaking, right? Where you're speaking, the point that you're raising is exactly what the Supreme Court on its own, no litigant brought this up. The Supreme Court brought this up and asked them to come back and argue these issues.
did the Supreme Court bring it up, or did Roberts bring it up? It's his court.
It's Roberts' court. You're absolutely right. And whether it's Roberts or one of the other Supremes, we know that they have brought this up. And when they've brought this up and asked for the re-argument, it's not good. In my world, it's not good. The way they phrased it, the way they've asked for these were things that were not sought by the petitioners in this case, either side. It's not good.
So
and we've
you're saying, when you're saying it's not good, you mean in terms of the outcome?
Outcome. I believe that the probable outcome is not favorable for the survival of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act.
If that goes away, what happens?
I apologize, I missed it.
I'm sorry, if Section 2 is gutted, what will be the result?
If they decide to that the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is unconstitutional, then that would mean that every state in the union and every place that wants to draw lines, they don't have to take the considerations of the majority minority districts for populations where people are congregated in certain areas of like mind into consideration when they draw the districts. They can crack them, they can stack them, they can do whatever they want to do in order for them to maintain and increase their power. That's what that would mean if Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is taken away. That protection is taken away. They'll be released. There's no fencing. There's no guardrails. They can do what they want to do in creating their districts. The Roberts courts, as you were laying out, Santita, the Roberts court, and we call it the Roberts court because he was the Chief Justice or is the Chief Justice of the court. They've been at this for a while. This isn't their first crack at this apple, first bite at the apple, whatever it is. We know that they did the Shelby decision, which opened the door for all of these really regressive pieces to making it more difficult for African Americans, young folks, and others to be able to access the ballot. We know that they came through with this Brinovich decision, which dealt with issues of methods of voting, that you can make it more difficult for people to vote so long as you provide other methods and opportunities for them to be able to vote. We know that they've come through with what we call the Rucho decision, which is a decision that said you can make these discriminatory, these wild-looking redistricting lines so long as you're doing it for partisan reason. So long as this is about your party gaining power, you're okay. This is the Roberts Court previously reasoning. So long as you're doing it for political reasons, you're fine. And if you do it for political reasons, by the way, the federal courts will be barred from hearing any claim of it. The only thing that what was on docket still to be said by them would be the determination of whether or not you can use race and disregard race and break it apart because of race, and that's a decision that is still out there and pending. But this Roberts Courts has been hostile to the Voting Rights Act. Its decisions have been hostile to the Voting Rights Act. Its decisions have been hostile to voters of color, Black voters, and voters of color across this country. This decision and the argument that will occur tomorrow is going to be the determining factor of whether or not we have a Voting Rights Act or not. It will just simply end it. You think what you saw in Texas with those 5 districts was something? You ain't seen nothing yet until you remove the guardrails completely and let the legislature do what it wants to do in these areas in creating power for themselves. That's the danger that exists with this case that's being argued tomorrow, Santita.
Well, that leads me to you, Representative Ron Reynolds, because you have been nodding vigorously in assent, because, of course, you and your colleagues made a run to freedom because you said, wait a minute, it's starting in Texas, but this is spreading all over the country. And who would think that Nebraska, it's like they knew where they were, the states that they were going to target, so they can lock in a permanent majority. Oh, what do you make of this case?
Well, Santita, first of all, I want to thank you for having this topic discussed We've discussed a lot of topics and everything is important, but I can't think of one that's more important than this because this touches on everything. Daryl is right. Attorney Daryl Jones with the Transformative Justice Coalition and Barbara Arnwine, they were at the front line sounding the alarm bells for Congress to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act, the For the People Act. They had several. They were pushing it. And it's unfortunate that we're in this position today where I'm very concerned. This is a grave concern of mine. And I know that we've had shock and awe from executive order and ICE raids and government shutdown. But ladies and gentlemen, this right here, if this passes, I mean, they gut the Section 2, that it is open season for every African American, Latino member of any legislature, Congress, city council, county commissioner. This would be, I mean, Santita, this would be a real tremendous setback to the progress we've made since Lyndon Baines Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
Wait a minute, hold on. You're looking at not just in Washington and in the state house and in the state senate. You're saying at every single level of government.
Yes, every single level of government. This would be open season because this applied to county commissioner precincts. This applied to elections, period. So this would have a fundamental wholesale shift in the way that districts are drawn. Daryl said it to you. They could crack it and pack it and remix it and do everything they can to maximize their voting strength of Republicans. Right now, they have to kind of do some farce and magic to make it seem like it's political. But this goes away. Oh, Santita, it will be no protection for people who look like us. I'm being dead serious with you. We would see a decrease, a significant decrease. There would be a call for the next census is not till 2030. They would start redistricting right away, just like what you see now, these mid-decade redistricting in Congress. These legislatures where I sit, they would start having redistricting because they could then wipe out some African American and Hispanic seats and get more power. And that is what it's all about. It's about power, Santita. This is what Project 2025, this is what President Trump and his cohorts have wanted to do. This is the reason why they tolerate his shenanigans, because he gave them the justices on the Supreme Court that, by the way, are lifetime appointees. We can't, the next election ain't gonna change that. These people are there for a life appointment. And so I am so concerned. I don't get concerned about a whole lot, Santita. I'm pretty, but this right here, yeah, I'm very concerned. And my seat, it doesn't belong to me. They can, but I'm on the chopping blocks as well because I have a protected seat. It won't be protected any longer. So
my brother.
John,
his seat is on the chopping block, and the seat that my brother Jesse is running for, along with Donna Miller and State Senator Willie Preston. So it's a magnificent field.
Let me say this very clearly so people can hear and understand, because a lot of times we talk and we give legalese and talk about jargon and packing and cracking. They don't understand that. This would be an assault on Black and brown representatives across America. Forget Texas.
Wait a minute. Do you think will the Latino community see it that way? Do you think that they will see this?
Santita, they may not want to see it, but they will be impacted. It will happen. They will be impacted. They will be taken out of office. Period. That's a fact. And I say that because I've been in the rooms where the only reason why there wasn't more collateral damage was because they didn't want to overreach with the Voting Rights Act. That was there as a guardrail, as Daryl said. Without any guardrails, I'm praying, Santita. I'm praying. This would be a dark day for minority representation. That happens to be the majority in so many places, right? But because they're in power and because the Supreme Court is been itching to do this, this could be checkmate.
Well, I think
Okay, Reverend Wilson.
I think the challenge we have is Black people we did not vote our strength ever in the last several elections, midterm and presidential elections. We have not voted our strength. I was in Mississippi with Reverend Jackson in '83 when we had not elected an African American to the Supreme Court since Reconstruction. We are now in a post-Reconstruction like era where the states' writers, the segregationists, those who were trying to secede from the Union have now figured out we have to take control of state legislative bodies because they draw the lines for the federal legislators and the US Senate candidates. And so what they're doing is saying, hey, we've been working on this for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
We finally control the House and the Senate in many states across America. And we're going to redraw these lines so that never again will we have a majority African American legislative district for the U.S. House of Representatives. And we're not going to have legislative districts in states where a majority of Black people are consolidated in a region. Even if they live and they're packed together, we're going to redraw the lines so that it will cut them up. And so that they will not be able easily, without a coalition, to get elected to office. So the Blacks don't understand it. African Americans have not understood, and Daryl's been fighting this forever. Latinos may not understand it because they voted, many of them, for this administration. And our Palestinian and our other ethnic brothers and sisters didn't understand this voting. They really never gave it a lot of thought because
Reverend Wilson, neither did many Black men who voted for this administration.
That's what I'm saying. We didn't understand it.
Yeah.
I'm telling you. And so they would tell you, it doesn't matter who I vote for. I don't have to vote for state rep. Students in HBCUs across America could have voted, registered and voted in the campuses in the states where they're attending college. It didn't occur to them Pell Grants would ever be impacted. It did not occur to them that their very livelihood and existence would be challenged by the U.S. Supreme Court. People thought the court was comprised of men and women who were great legal scholars. No, they are political operatives.
Mm.
They are appointed, recommended to the court by a politician. They are confirmed by the Senate politicians. They're recommended by the president, whoever that is, and then they're confirmed by the Senate, whoever they are. There's a political ideology that they're following. So the Roberts Court is really Trump's court, whether you want to admit that or not. And his team is determining how we're going to look at voting going forward. Now, it can be a dark day based on their decision. Justice Brown and Justice Sotomayor will write scathing dissents, depending on how the majority rules. I don't know if you have another swing person on that court that will see voting as essential for all people. You have Sotomayor, you have Ketanji Brown Jackson. I'm afraid that the Thomas will not be voting with the dissent. So then who do you have left? Gorsuch and the other lady. And you know where Roberts is going to be. He's going to break the tie if there is one. out of 9 people, how do you think it's going to look? But I'm not discouraged because I know this should fuel us for 2026. We have to change Congress, we have to change the Senate, got to change these state legislators, Texas, Illinois, Missouri, Wisconsin, Michigan. We got to really start focusing like they've been focusing ever since slavery.
But Reverend Wilson, stay
War.
right there. Stay right there, Reverend Wilson, because one of the things that we learned with Reverend, I mean, because we have to remember Reverend Jackson ran for president when the Voting Rights Act was not 20 years old.
That's right.
Dr. King had not been dead 20 years. Okay. Running for president, and let alone on the platform, with the platform upon which he stood, was absolutely revolutionary. And we've not seen anything like it. Because he ran as an unreconstructed populist as a Black man. Okay. The thing is, he said, you know, look, I know I'm David, but I got a rock. And we can take out Goliath, but there's a freedom train coming, but you got to register to ride. Frank Watkins, who was a white man, who was Reverend's wingman for 50 plus years, he said there is no reason that Black people should not have the South locked up, not just the South side of Chicago. He said you should control Chicago, because even 40 years ago, we had more numbers than we have now. He said you all should control the South, but you can't have 900,000 unregistered voters in Texas. You know, it cannot be the law to register to vote, to register seniors in high school to vote, and not let that be the top line agenda at every church. We control the churches, our churches.
Mississippi was 40% African American when Reverend ran in 83.
Yes.
11 southern states, it was majority Black.
Wait a minute. And Jeanette, as you remember, when he would go to the town square, Black people would be afraid to come to the town square. They had white sheriffs and law enforcement officials who were standing there patting their guns like something out of Dukes of Hazzard. I promise.
I saw it.
We were there.
The man, we were at the polling place. He's strapped with guns. The Black man comes up, and we were traveling with then U.S. Attorney William Bradford Reynolds. He could see this. That's how we got this 1960, the Voting Rights Act, Section 2.
And let me give a shout out to Black agents from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation and Black police officers and Black law enforcement all over the country who took their vacation time to protect him. They said, you do not know what's out here, and we're not going to tell you. And Reverend would go stand in the middle of a town square. And people would be too afraid to come out.
And so I think we're back at that place.
We're there.
And so I know, I don't know what the Supreme Court is going to do. Daryl, you're there more often than I am. You had a feeling. And what I'm saying, we're going to have to do a same kind of crusade across America to teach our people their power and push them for 2026 is the most consequential election in our lifetime.
But Reverend Wilson, the reason I bring that up is because we were on the Southern Crusade with Reverend.
Yes.
And it's important for people to know first of all, Barack didn't just pop up.
No.
And Reverend didn't just run.
No.
These people threatened, he was the most threatened candidate in history.
Without security, because they did not anticipate the level of phone calls and threats and mail and text. I mean,
he was already threatened all the time because he was the top Black, he was the most visible Black leader and the most powerful one, right? Yeah. But what ended up happening was, so the Fruit of Islam said, look, Minister Farrakhan said, look, we will protect him because these people are serious. There were more than a dozen people put in prison off the first presidential run alone. I'm just saying, and which means they got someone who with their hands cocked on the trigger, because that's how that works. I'm saying, you know what? It is that serious. We need to understand what goes into, Daryl, as you know, and as you know, Representative Reynolds, the vote. So you've got to, there has to be a real campaign, as Reverend Wilson, please pick up here. You have to have a real campaign to get everybody registered to vote. We have more.
And
We didn't have this in 80. We didn't have this 40 years ago,
And
45 years ago.
Around and give these little rat-a-tat speeches. You have to Reverend went church by church, school by school, went to high schools, colleges, and churches all across the country.
All the radio stations, all the radio shows.
He had Bishop Ellis was he had 30 radios, or 30 or 40
in Virginia.
Reverend was on all of them. When we were in Mississippi, we were on Kixie all day, every day, talking about registration and voting. Reverend said, when I run, we win. When we run together. So people ran for county supervisor. They had never run for county commissioners before. They had never run for county sheriff before. People got inspired. And at that time, there was only one Black elected to the state legislature, and he looked like a white man.
Well, there's that.
No, seriously, I met him and I was like, oh my goodness. He said, yeah, I'm not one of them, but I'm just telling you, I'm in the state.
Well, that's like Judge Butterfield, who became the congressman in North Carolina. No one had any idea that he was a Black man.
And Daryl they're running and trying to teach voting rights. We got to get these people to understand their power and turn them on. And it takes a lot. It's going to take everybody that's running. They can't just run, vote for me. No, it ain't about you. Vote for yourself. You're voting for your SNAP benefits to be restored. You're voting for Medicaid. You didn't understand Obamacare. You don't understand Affordable Care. You voted for your health care, plain and simple.
And you're right on point, Reverend Wilson and Santita, with regards to the understanding and the teaching side of it. But that's one of the reasons why both Barbara Arwine and I are on a crusade right now on many platforms as we can to tell people what's going on before the Supreme Court. If you're in the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia area, we're going to be assembled along with Black Voters Matters, bringing buses in. We have the League of Women Voters, Common Cause, Leadership Conference. All these folks are going to be assembling at the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, tomorrow at 9 a.m. for the arguments. It's important, Santita, your brother, Congressman Jonathan Jackson, was with us Sunday night presenting to a group of ministers throughout the South. And these are the largest 15, 20, thousand, whatever, ministers that are throughout the South. And one of the things that Congressman Jackson said is he reminded us of the inside-out strategy that needs to be employed. That is that, you have his office inside of Congress and can pass legislation, but it's the occurrence of things that happen outside of Congress to put pressure on everyone else. The same inside-out strategy has got to be used on the Supreme Court right now. So while Janae Nelson and the Legal Defense Fund are in there arguing before the justices of the Supreme Court, and they will not issue a decision tomorrow, the argument is simply tomorrow, that's why we're going to be assembled outside the Supreme Court so that the justices know that they're not operating in a closet, in a shroud of darkness where people are not paying attention. Coexisting at the time that we will be rallying at the U.S. Supreme Court. If anyone is in Baton Rouge or in the Baton Rouge area of Louisiana, the new National Christian Leadership Movement, the League of Women Voters, the Louisiana NAACP, they're going to do a prayer vigil. They're going to encircle what we call the site of the sin, right? The legislative state house in Louisiana. And they're going to do a prayer vigil over what has happened there and praying for the good outcome, a favorable outcome from the Supreme Court. But as Fannie Lou Hamer said, you can pray until you faint. You got to get up and do something. We need folks to get out and do something, to be involved in either the activities that's going on. If you can't make it to Louisiana or you can't make it to Washington, D.C., we encourage you to watch, because the Supreme Court clerks, the Supreme Court justices clerks, also take note of how much popularity or viewership the cases have when they're being argued before the courts. So you can go to supremecourt.gov oral arguments, and you can watch the oral argument there. SupremeCourt.gov oral arguments. We need to be certain that our community is aware of what's going on, and has an understanding of what's at bay in this situation. When you're talking about when Reverend Jackson ran, talking about lifting all tides, and we need everybody to run for all these positions so that it's a complete we that's making the change. What this case, what the Calais case has the ability to do, is to make it more difficult for folks across, for Representative Ron Reynolds across this nation to be able to run for his office, because they'll draw his district in a way that's not favorable for him. That's what the concern is regarding this case. And this is how they take away Black and brown power from the people that deserve it in accordance with our Constitution. So we encourage everyone to participate some kind of way. Don't be on the sidewalks on this. You got to be in the street. You got to be participating. You got to be pushing back. Santita, there's a piece that we have at the tjcoalition.org website that talks about the viral voting moment. And you can just Google and YouTube viral voting moment, and it gives you a 2-minute and 10-second explanation about what this case is all about. To break it down, we need to be certain that the churches are involved and that everybody is involved, so that we can take a step and push forward. Representative Reynolds and I always talk, and we have a piece that I like to throw out, where we say that, in 1965, today, we always hear people say that, if I was there with John Lewis, I would have done this and that to the Alabama State Troopers. I would have done this. I would have done that. Well, guess what, folks? This is your Edmund Pettus Bridge moment right now. They're coming for your vote that he was beat upside the head for, that people that were slaughtered over. That's what they're coming for right now. This is your Edmund Pettus Bridge moment. What are you going to do about it?
And the Edmund Pettus Bridge moment didn't look like a moment at the time.
No.
People need to understand that. Dr. King's biggest marches, that was the Selma to Montgomery March. It was the March on Washington. Mm-hmm. It was the anti-Vietnam War march in Manhattan. Most of his marches had a couple hundred people at most. Most people were too afraid. They felt he was too controversial. In the last couple of years of his life, this, Reverend Wilson, because we've seen this with Reverend, couldn't get in a church pulpit. He was thinking of leaving the movement. He said, perhaps I'm in the way. He knew he'd become that unpopular. You've got to get involved, and you have to get people registered to vote. And I will tell you this. It requires your vigilance, eternal vigilance. You have to work all the time. I grew up in the house with Reverend Jackson, and I'm going to tell you something. We had like 5 lines, because we didn't just have a regular phone in the house. We had an office phone, because he was on the phone all the time. Plus, my parents had 5 kids. But that wasn't the first consideration. He was always working. I get up to go to school about 4:45 in the morning. The first line would always be on, almost always, when he was home. He was on the phone calling people. I got an idea. We need to do this. He'd be on the radio doing this, Jeanette. He'd be doing shows, morning drive. I'm not saying that everybody has to have his energy, but you know what? We wouldn't be here without it. It's going to require that kind of intentionality, because I am struck by the fact, and you have been in the Supreme Court so many times, to Daryl, that you have said the question raised by the Roberts Court makes me very uncomfortable. And I was made even more, it resonated with what I was seeing in corporate media. The way they laid it out, I said, I think these people might take the rest of this Voting Rights Act, because they're poised to do it. David Daley's been trying to tell us this with his 3 books, Rat Effed, Unrigged, and Anti-Democratic. The last book, Anti-Democratic, talks about the 50-year journey to give us the court that we've got right now that would undo our Voting Rights Act. Here we are. I don't feel anyways tired. I think this is an exciting time that's going to make us appreciate where we have been and what it is that we need to do. I only have about 5 minutes left here, so I'm going to give this time to all of you. because I've got to go into the next hour. We're going to be talking with Bryce Green. So many of you enjoyed him. He wants to talk about the peace deal. We're going to be talking about, ceasefire or peace, ICE on our streets. There's a lot to talk about with him. You all enjoyed him so much last week. I said, okay. And RJW949 says, tell him, Daryl Jones. Okay, Daryl Jones. But you just told us and tell us, well, because I know we can't have a visual stream, but we can hear the oral arguments. I know I see them on C-SPAN all the time. Reverend Wilson, what would you have us do?
Well, I think we have to come together and organize, unite all across the country, faith leaders, the Divine Nine, everybody, all of our social clubs, our top ladies of distinction, 100 Black men. We all have to have one agenda. That agenda is increase the voter turnout, teach voter education, understand the Voting Rights Act. So if those who cannot go to the Supreme Court, you can pray while those oral arguments are going on. You can call your friends and say, we got to pause for a moment. Every pastor this Sunday, talk about what happened this week. They were before the Supreme Court trying to eliminate our voting rights by gerrymandering, redrawing the lines, all of that. We have to give everybody a fact sheet. Daryl, you all have been doing a great job with that. We've got to communicate widely and have every week, we must have national calls and local calls. Because what happened in Texas will happen to every state in America because they are focused. We must refocus and sharpen our point, as Reverend would say, and get this vote out and get our people ready for 2026. No matter what happens in the Supreme Court, we have a mandate to follow.
Absolutely.
We'll be convening, and we're open our platform to those who can come on Saturdays. We're going to have to get to the point where we can drop in videos from wherever you are to give people updates. Like we need to have a report about what's going on in Texas since you all left here from exile. And Daryl, you got to come back home and tell us what's happening in the Supreme Court. We got a legal defense fund. They're making these arguments powerfully. So we've got to show our power, our strength, and keep and organize state by state, district by district.
Mm-hmm. And we have to do it in person.
We can win. We can win.
And that's it. And maybe this moment, Reverend Wilson, is so that we can know that we can win.
Well, God says to us, is there another prophet in town? Have we lost all the prophets? No. We must speak to this moment. As Daryl said, it's our time. It's our season. You don't have to wonder what you could have done, should have done. Do it now. Do it today.
Well, I literally have a minute for each of you. Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds.
I love Dr. Wilson's comments and also Attorney Jones. This is the first urgency of now. I don't know what the future holds, but I know who holds the future. Mm-hmm. All of us have an inherent responsibility to do our part. We can't control outside forces, but we can control what we do, and what we do matters. And so I'm encouraging everyone, don't give up, don't give in. This is a marathon and not a sprint. And finally, Dr. King got it right when he said that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. So let's continue to stay the course and fight the fight, and we will overcome regardless of what the Supreme Court decides.
Amen. Attorney Daryl Jones, you and Attorney Barbara Arnwine are on WOLDC every Tuesday at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, but you might be doing some special shows this week. I don't know, because this is a very, very big moment in which we find ourselves. Attorney Jones, you'll close us out.
This is a huge moment. Folks think that this is the last stop when we're dealing with Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Let me caution you, it may not be the last stop for this court. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, the language that's there is identical to the language that's in the 15th Amendment. So we don't know what the last stop is. But I do caution you about one thing. It's time to get off the sidewalk and to get into the street and to get into good trouble for the voting rights of all of our community and all of us. Join us. You can go to the tjcoalition.org webpage to find out more information. There may be live streaming the rally that we have in DC at the NAACP LDF NAACP.org, NAACP-LDF.org. They also have great resources there with regards to explaining the Khaled case and all that's going on. Folks, this is it. You know, we're at the crest of the bridge, and the question is, are you with us or are you on the sidelines waiting to see what happens? We need you to be with us right now because we need to succeed. We need the court to know, the Supreme Justices, the Supremes, to know that we understand what you're doing, we got what you're doing, and we're moving forward.
You know, everybody get on board. A freedom train is pulled out the station. Come on. We need to get registered. We need to ride and know that we can win. But you got to get out here and make it happen.
We're going to win. We're going to win.
We have lost these jobs and on and on and on and on and on and on. But this is a moment. I think it's a wake-up call. I am not despairing in this moment at all because our foreparents have done their job. They've done the work. They've showed us how to do it. So everybody get busy. What did Arsenio Hall say? Let's get busy. Next hour, Bryce Green talking about international politics right here on the Santita Jackson Show. Back with more in just a minute. Attorney Daryl Jones, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time on WOL in Washington, D.C. Of course, keep in touch with Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds and Reverend Dr. Jeanette Wilson. Meet us at Rainbow Push for the Operation Push Forum every Saturday. You can catch us on the Word Network. Come in person. Come there. We need to see you. We need to be together. Come on, let us be together. Hey, Max, out there in D.C., and Robert, seeing all of you, meet me as we talk with Bryce Green on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a moment.